Welcome back to another edition of Byline with Ben Dennis. I've got a big question today. Can AI add more trust in government? Can it make government work more efficiently? Can it bring power to the people in more ways than ever before after 250 years of this great experiment that we call the United States of America? Can it also allow elected leaders the chance to be more transparent with folks back home? These are the folks that elected them anyway. You sent them to Congress, you sent them to your state house, legislature, but ultimately, does it allow you an opportunity to increasingly share your voice in real time? Can AI and tech allow this to happen and make sure that our elected leaders are voting the way that you and the majority of folks back home really want? Well, there's a digital platform that's trying to do this. A couple out there, but one of them, namely, it's called the Digital Democracy Project. The idea, you go onto this platform online, it verifies that you are a registered voter where you currently live through a number of different systems. We'll get into that without getting into the nitty-gritty tech bro terminology here. And you're able to vote yes or no on a specific bill that is likely coming before Congress, that is before Congress, and it would allow your elected leaders, this platform, once people vote on it, the ability to see how their constituents back home want them to vote. Could this ultimately, this tech, the use of AI, make you more powerful and also make elected leaders far more accountable to the folks that got them elected to begin with? So, our interview today at the DDP, the Digital Democracy Project, is with Ramon Perez. Ramon is a military veteran. He served in the Middle East. He lost a very good friend of his named Tyler years ago. He says he was killed by a sniper in the Middle East in the early 2000s. And he wanted to keep his buddy's memory alive to deploy some of these more democratic tactics back here at home to keep democracy alive. Ramon says what happened on January 6th with the insurrection at the Capitol and the riots in 2020 in Portland, Oregon, after the death of George Floyd and during the Black Lives Matter movement. He said that he didn't want to see that kind of unrest and some growing distrust in our country to grow and percolate here in the States. And so he wanted to go after a platform where more people could maybe share their voice, make their elected leaders know how they side on a specific issue and how it's going to impact them at their own homes for their own family. So let's dive in with my conversation with Ramon. I ask him how this product works, how your information is kept safe, who he's trying to pitch this idea to right now. He says he got some interest in Florida, but it was ultimately killed after getting Democrat and Republican support in the Sunshine State. However, he's trying to expand this idea where representative democracy is in the palm of our own hands on our cell phone. So let's dive in. Let's chat. And joining me now is Ramon Perez with the Digital Democracy Project. Ramon, I appreciate you joining Byline. Thanks for jumping on this call.
Ben, thanks for having me, Ben. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And, you know, as we like to touch in this podcast, and it's how AI and media meets democracy, future tech, and really peeling away the headlines that matter to people. And as we're approaching not only the congressional midterms, but say once those midterms are over, you might be having presidential candidates chomping at the bit right now to get into these primary races. It's going to be a crowded field, especially for Democrats, as many analysts will see it. I'm interested to hear more about what you're working on right now with voters letting their leaders know how they might side on an issue with a push of a button, if you will, on their cell phone. So just tell me first and foremost, what's the DDP really all about?
Yeah, so Digital Democracy Project, the idea here is to use modern technology to try to reimagine our relationship as voters with our government, ostensibly the government that we own and that is of, by, and for the people. So we are just using tools to do a more modern adaptation of you having a say in the political process. So to be more concrete, we're using mobile voting technology, which is technology that was predominantly invented for military voters overseas to cast an absentee ballot by phone securely. We partnered with a company called Votes back in 2021. They're a Boston-based startup. They built a mobile
VOATZ, right?
VOATZ, yes, exactly. You can check them out. They've been in about 150 elections now throughout the United States and Canada and Mexico. So they have a good track record, but we are using it for a different purpose. We're not a supervisor of elections. We're a nonprofit organization. We said, well, look, if you can invent this technology that lets a military person verify their identity with a photo ID that matches a selfie scan, find them on the voter file, have this whole blockchain backend and homomorphic encryption and all this like fancy stuff to make sure that the votes aren't manipulated in the process between when they push the button on their phone and when it's counted by the elections office. If you can do all of that to guarantee a secure election, then why should we have to wait every couple of years to have a say in our government? Why couldn't we create something like the Netflix of government, government on demand, government in your pocket? And that's what we set out to do. So we started loading legislation, things that are being debated on Capitol Hill. We started this in Florida because it was a smaller 60-day legislative session, fewer bills for us to track. We have to figure out what's moving through committees, what's going to make it through the floor. So we want to triage the process because there are literally thousands of bills that get drafted. So we try to identify for people. This would have been, we went into beta testing in 2022, and then we did the first live legislative session in 2023. Gotcha. So, this was our fourth legislative session here in 2026.
How did the state react initially?
Actually, we ended up with a support from Republicans and Democrats. We had a bipartisan appropriation from some senior Republicans in the Senate and a junior Democrat in the House who worked together, pushed it through the entire budget process, got it approved into the budget, and then Ron DeSantis line item vetoed it. So it was, I guess you could say, mixed reaction.
Yeah, bipartisan. I don't even know how you even say that at that point, but
hard to imagine, isn't it?
Right. So, but let me ask you this: what was your pitch to Florida lawmakers, and how did they initially react? How did you convince them to get some funding? By the way, how much did you get approved before it got nixed?
Well, it was a $250,000 allocation, which is small, obviously, for the size we're at as a startup. That's great. I mean, that's good money to us for doing this kind of work. Pays software and servers and software licenses are what it costs us to run this. But yeah, the pitch to them was, look, wouldn't you like to know what your district thinks in a way that is verifiable? That the challenge is, I've spent a fair amount of time on Capitol Hill. These guys get inundated with emails. A lot of them are form generated and increasingly AI generated emails. Mm-hmm. So they can't trust the veracity of them. They don't know if these people are actually in their district. They don't even know if these people are human beings at this point, let alone are they constituents in my district. So we're doing the difficult work up front of verifying people against the voter file using this technology, the same as if it was running any real election and following the same security protocols. Device level encryption, two-factor authentication, encrypted tokens, putting blocks onto the blockchain, a distributed ledger, all these things that make this possible. But for a legislator, it's basically real-time public polling that they don't have to pay 30, 40, 50 grand to run a poll like they would in their district. And most legislators are never going to do that unless it is a competitive election. And Ben, most elections are no longer competitive. The real race is the primary, not the general election. By the time November rolls around, I think it was 97% of districts in Florida were not even within a 5 percentage point margin of victory in November. And I'm talking about legislative districts at the state house. The federal districts are like 94% of them are completely baked by November. They're not even competitive.
I mean, the primary is when you get to decide the type of candidate you want. Exactly.
And that's where a lot of them were interested, because they're not thinking about, if it's a Republican or a Democrat, it doesn't matter. They're not thinking about the other party. They're thinking about, how do I stay on the right side of my own party? How do I hear from my constituents in my district so that if it comes to a vote on a topic that splits the party, I want to know where to be? None of them want to walk in and take a tough vote without having some insight into whether or not they're going to lose a primary as a result of it. And so I think that's where they saw the value of it, was kind of like a real-time pulse of their districts, where it's verified that these are people in their districts. Where we probably got in trouble, if I'm being honest, is that we probably had, because we produced these scorecards, which I haven't really talked about yet, but we take what did people want in the app, and we look at how their legislators voted over the course of the session, and we produce a scorecard, just like a baseball card, but it basically measures people against their own district. It says, here's what the voters wanted, here's what you actually did, and how often does it match? And some Republicans and Democrats come out looking good. Some Republicans and Democrats come out looking bad, according to that. And we think that some of the ones that ended up with a poor scorecard went to the governor and said, you got to kill this thing because it makes us look bad.
Well, let me ask you this before we get into the nitty-gritty of how everything works. Where's your presence now beyond Florida? I know that there is a similar effort that's already gotten the backing of California Governor Gavin Newsom right now in some capacity, a separate group. So where are you at currently?
Right. So we've now proven out the ability to do this nationwide. So any American, as long as you're registered to vote in your state, can download the Votes app or go to our website, digitaldemocracyproject.org, and get the links to download. Or do it in the web page. But we can verify people against the voter file in every state now, at least at the U.S. House level. So that's what we're doing currently is we're letting people vote on bills in Congress now nationwide. And we've also added an additional 6 states where we can verify people down to the state House and state Senate district against their voter file from their state, which we get from the state. We're 501c3, so states can give us the voter file for these purposes. So we have added Virginia, Arizona, Utah, Washington, Michigan, Massachusetts, where we can do it at the state level. And so we're starting to expand into additional states, covering additional state legislatures. This year was the first year we covered those additional state legislatures as well as federal bills. But our ambition is to be in all 50 states, letting people vote on state level as well as federal level legislation in 2027. So we're trying to move very quickly to expand to let this be an option for everybody. And then after 2027 beyond, we would love to be doing it at the local level. We would love to be doing, partnering with a city like DC or New York or someplace where they have shown an interest in, getting more voter inputs on these big civic engagement types of projects. California is doing this too. I think it's definitely in the water. You can feel that people are looking for reform. They're looking for more access, more accountability, more transparency in government. And that's both left and right. This is not really a political thing. Much of the strain of I do a lot of podcast interviews with people in all sorts of political podcasting areas. And when I talk to the MAGA folks, it's kind of the same thing, which is that they feel a lack of accountability in government. And they are looking for more direct access to government. So
if you feel like you're being unheard, then yeah, you're always looking for access.
Right, exactly. So it's just a question of, can you do it in a way that's got veracity, that it's got the security behind it, so it can't be hacked or manipulated. That's always been the real challenge. I mean, I think going back to even Ross Perot in the 90s when he was running for president, proposed something like being able to, tell legislators how to vote from phone calls and such. I mean, he was talking about in the mid 90s. Right. So it's not a new idea.
People are still calling the interns on Capitol Hill and letting them know how they feel.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the challenge is you can call the switchboard and you can email your congressman. The challenge is they are not obligated to report what their districts want. They are actually exempted from a FOIA request, which is I know you're a journalist. You probably do this quite a lot, but legislators are actually exempt from a Freedom of Information Act request. So they don't have to publish that 99% of the people who called into my office were in favor of, the Iran War Powers resolution and I voted against it, something like that. They don't have to publish that information.
In many cases, they don't document it. It's not, as far as I know, they're not mandated their office to document every single constituent call that comes in. Absolutely. And that would be the roadblock there. So we've identified the issue, what you're trying to achieve here. How do you do it? You talk about you're able to verify people to vote or at least let their leaders in their House congressional districts know how they would side on a specific issue without getting into some of the super high tech bro semantics, if you will. How does this happen? What do people have to upload? How do you verify it and making sure that people's information is safe?
Yeah, it's actually using similar technology to what's now become quite common for banking or real estate. It's basically you take a picture of your face, you kind of do a liveness check to make sure you're not recording somebody else's face.
A wax figure at Madame Tussauds.
Exactly. And you take a picture of your driver's license front and back. The driver's license, the real IDs now, especially the barcode, has a lot of the same detail level. And then it matches your face against the image on your driver's license to make sure that's the same face. And then the data on the back is used to find you on the voter file to make sure you are registered at that address in that state. So that's the same protocol
and that's the voter file that's publicly accessible you're talking about.
That's the voter file that the state sometimes makes publicly accessible and sometimes has a lot of restrictions on it depending on which state you're in.
Right.
So, yeah.
So how are you able to get to the voter file? Like, let's say if it's in a state where it's not publicly accessible.
As a 501c3, that is basically a nonprofit organization that does voting rights work. We check the box in the states where it's not public, where if you're 501c3 doing this kind of work in Massachusetts, for example, you can get access, whereas you can't normally, Michigan is probably the example I should have given there. Massachusetts is actually harder. You have to have a direct exemption from the Secretary of State's office. Whereas Florida, under the Sunshine Laws, or Florida's version of the Freedom of Information Act, we can get the voter file much more directly. They just send it to you on a disc. So,
okay, interesting. States, at least in the year of our Lord 2026, they are handling how their own elections take place.
Correct.
They obviously set their own rules about transparency here. All right, so let's talk about, you've identified goals, your mission, and how people, you're competing with other platforms. We can get into that in a second, but let's just also say this. How do you verify that, let's say, a special interest group isn't flooding your entire platform?
So we've verified about 24,000 people through this process right now. We recognize that in order to get real voter power, we need to be in the millions, right? That's where we kind of have to have that kind of growth in order, because you're right. If you're at 24,000 people and then a special interest group with 5,000 followers all gets in and votes at the same time, it's going to skew the results. So the way you solve that is by, one, the tools are available to everybody. So if one group gets in, let's say it's a gun related issue and you've got, gun control and gun rights folks on the opposite ends of that argument. If one group jumps in and all of their people vote one way, suddenly the numbers become skewed. And then that other group is like, well, wait a minute, let's get our people active and participating to balance it back out. And then hopefully, I think that's the way you get to scale, is that you get more and more participation, mainly because people don't want to feel unrepresented. I think that's one answer to that question. The other answer is currently special interest groups can just go and lobby some senator. So they only have to convince one person. In our system, you have to convince all of society to agree with your point of view, or at least a majority, a 51% majority of society. So it's a much harder case to go and carry out a media campaign and organize a mass group of people for your position. If it's not a popular position, it's much easier to go and just bribe some congressman with a huge campaign donation. So that, I think, is our current system. We're trying to actually break that bad set of incentives, and by introducing transparency and accountability into the process.
So how do you expand if it's, because I essentially you've already answered the question, which was if only a small percentage of constituents participate, should lawmakers really treat it as representative? And then follow up, would have been, how do you stop organized interest groups from flooding the system? Go back to your point here. How do you expand and make sure that folks who may not necessarily be watching cable news all day long have push notifications to their, political action groups or their local leaders on their Twitter, X account, et cetera, so that people who may not always be constantly engaged in politics are participating?
Yeah, I think we're a startup nonprofit. We're doing this with volunteer developers, coders, organizers, legislative policy analysts, people contributing their time. The way we expand is we convince people that we either reform democracy or it comes to an end. I don't know that there's an alternative choice here. And so we need to show people that there are ways to use these tools for positive public benefit to really reimagine what democracy can be. So there is that. I think another thing is partnerships. We're going to try to create the tools, but it's going to be up to different groups. The League of Women Voters has been a tremendous partner in Florida, but also there are candidates running for office who have endorsed the project saying, I want to be a servant leader. I want to use these tools. This is how you're going to influence my thinking in Congress. And there's actually a guy named Dan Williams in Florida's 11th district who's gone even further and said, no, I'm going to be a pure avatar of the people. You're going to vote the way you vote on the phone, and I'm going to vote with the majority on every bill in Congress. So if he's got a contested primary right now, August 18th down in Central Florida. But if he wins that, he would be the first person, as far as I know, in American history on a major party platform saying that he would be that he's taking the mantle of direct democracy to Washington. So that's a very interesting.
Specifically with your platform?
Exactly. So he actually, he is a professor. He's a technology professor at a university in Central Florida. And it kind of was like, hey, what if I create this kind of thing and then run for office on this concept? And then he found us and said, wow, they've already created the thing. I can just run for office. So, so he's a very interesting because he kind of found us and then used that as a springboard for launching a congressional campaign. And so we'll see where that goes. I mean, but you've got to convince primary voters in the Democratic Party to embrace direct democracy, which I would argue both parties are not necessarily convinced of democracy right now. They want to propose their own platform, their own point of view. And they don't necessarily want somebody who's going to go to office with the idea that everybody has an equal say. That's not what parties are built on, right? So we'll see if he can make it through a primary process, but I think it's very interesting. And so far that he's gone the furthest of any of the candidates, but.
Do you think that a platform like this could actually amplify the loudest voice rather, instead of the average voter? Obviously, you want to get more and more people to participate in this, but some might just be averse and they just, they'd rather just sit back and maybe phone it in or communicate in some other fashion. How do you make sure that, I mean, this is up to the legislator, but would you agree that they've got to make sure that all lines of communication are open, whether it's this platform or elsewhere? Yeah,
I think they should keep all lines of communication open for sure. I think that as far as the loudest voice, I think of the Wikipedia model where you've got billions of people use Wikipedia every day, but only something like 2% actually will write or edit a Wikipedia article. Because they care about that particular.
There's a vetting process too to even be allowed to write and edit an article.
Yeah, that's right. And so there's a whole process of people will make a contribution because it's a topic they know a lot about or want to contribute, but then they may not edit any, there's a bazillion articles.
Right.
So I think it's a similar philosophy. I think a lot of people will get involved because it's a topic that they care a lot about. They may jump into the app and be like, I really care about this, the one big beautiful bill or these high profile pieces of legislation, but I don't care about everything else. Now, other people are like super voters. We hear from people who vote every week. We're loading new bills based on what's happening in Congress or in their state house. And so we hear from people who vote every week. They vote on every single thing. They read every bill. We use AI quite a lot. And I know you cover that a lot in your journalism, but we use AI quite a lot to help simplify and put the bills into plain language, make it easy for people to understand what the bill does.
Who is ultimately digesting and filtering, those summaries? We're in the age of where AI is summarizing a lot of these things. Even legislators, we've already seen examples where they've admitted they've put bills into Claude, because it's so long.
Yes.
So is there a human factor behind all of these summaries before it's put out? If not, who's verifying it? How do you make sure it's still objective as the bill is originally written?
Yeah. So ours is actually still quite human, very much human in the loop, because we are triaging the bills firstly. So we have legislative analysts who have Capitol Hill experience who are volunteering to help us know what's coming through Congress, what's likely to get a vote on the full floor, what's moving through the committee process. So we're already narrowing down from the 100,000 or so bills that get drafted to the very few who will actually get a floor vote.
I mean, without naming names, who are these people? What are their positions? Are they currently still in Congress? Are they people who just have experience on the Hill?
Yeah, experience on the Hill. So they've been legislative staffers, or they've been, policy advocates who have worked a lot on the Hill. So kind of understand
from both parties?
Yes.
Okay.
So actually, at the very beginning, we had I had a Republican and a Democrat. So we started in Florida, who both had worked in Tallahassee on Capitol Hill as staffers, and they would read the bills and write summaries and to try to keep it nonpartisan. Obviously, that's incredibly slow. It took a very long time, and so we could only handle a couple of bills in each session. What AI gave us was the ability to really speed up the number that we could do, because now a language model reads and provides the first draft. And so our team can then review it, make sure there's no hallucinations, make sure it's covering all the salient points. Oftentimes there are gotchas that are buried inside, or especially amendments that really change the nature of a bill. Mm-hmm. So they really have to kind of put the finishing touches on it and then put it into our system. And that goes into the Votes app so that people can vote on it, and goes onto our website so people can educate themselves on that particular topic.
So a human is generating the prompt for the AI platform, saying, get to the crux of this bill, identify if there's any portions that may alter the original intent of it. Are there some just things like that? Is it the
Yes.
human that's creating that prompt?
Yes. And what would an organization that supports this kind of bill, what kind of organizations are typically supportive of this bill? What kind of organizations are typically opposed to this bill?
Okay.
And can you go out and find specific organizations that have put out a press release or put something on their website saying that they support this bill or oppose this bill? Can you find those and bring those back into our system? So we try to surface those to our voters so that voters know if there's an organization that they tend to affiliate with, that organization, what positions has it taken on which bills. I think that's a useful signal to people to know what to support or oppose before they make their decision. So we really try to take the party out of it, even though obviously you can't really get around that too much. But people have come to us and said, oh, you got to tell us who sponsored this bill. And I've always been resistant to that, because I feel like our goal is educate yourself on the policy, and does this particular bill, in the black and white of it, is it a good idea? According to you, do you think it's a good idea? Regardless of which party is behind it or which personality is behind it. I would love to get past that and really get people to focus on the substance of the policy itself. Because what we find is that when you take this left versus right tribalism out of the equation, people's point of view is actually all over the map on these different policies. Mm-hmm. And I find people all the time who are MAGA people who believe in Medicare for all, or who are left wing on one policy but very right wing on another. I mean, it's like these labels.
Some of the loudest voices
simplistic.
Are the ones that get heard, and social
Yes.
media has done this. I can't tell you how many different studies that point this out. The algorithm is bringing people back for the content that gets them hot, or it gets them super excited to support you. I don't have to go into that. So you've already, to me, it seems like you believe that AI is going to help the democratic system that we have today versus hinder. And do you think that it could ultimately establish more trust in our democratic system?
I really do. I mean, I use Perplexity every morning to read the news now. I think the headlines are algorithmically generated to make me angry. And so I use AI to just say, what's going on today that's interesting? And then I'll dig into it that way, based on what I'm interested in. I think that when it comes to summarizing legislation, we're getting a look behind the curtain that we would not be able to get otherwise, because these bills are written by lawyers for other lawyers. Right. They're heavily esoteric legalese.
But they have to be, though, because it has to pass constitutional muster.
Yeah, and it has to be enforced by a judge at some point. So it's designed for a system that is not us. And I think that's one of the things that AI is giving us, is the ability to peek into the process and understand a language that we don't speak. So I'm excited about it. I'm incredibly optimistic about what the technology can do, as long as it's used for positive purpose. It's ultimately just a tool, and that tool depends on the dude behind the keyboard whose intentions are either good or evil. I mean, it comes back down to the same sense of human morality and public purpose and how the tools get used.
Let's go to this point of accountability. Suppose a legislator ignores what their constituents overwhelmingly ask them to do, whether it be your platform, another, then what? Does it all come down to, the sheer number of people who are participating in this type of opinion sharing, if you will?
Exactly. Our hope is to create a system of incentives that is just as powerful, or if not more powerful, than the system of incentives that lobbying groups have available to them. Our hope is that if you are consistently not doing what your district wants, it's going to reflect on your scorecard, because we're going to publish how did you vote, what did your legislators want in the app, and eventually, your grade gets low enough that some challenger comes around and says, I can do better than a 5%. Why don't you give me a chance?
So you're all about
I think that's
legislators,
when we see real change.
bypassing
You got to get enough
lobbyists.
participation that the scorecards have real biting teeth, and that a legislator is worried about their score getting too low because it's an objective scorecard. We're not like the Sierra Club or the Chamber of Commerce or Gun Owners of America. All of them produce scorecards on their own niche issues. We're the only ones producing a scorecard on democracy. Are you doing the basic job you were hired to do, which is represent that district? Regardless of that district's political lean, it's irrelevant to us. You were hired to represent that district. Are you representing them? And some Republicans do well, some Democrats do well, and the opposite is also true. So we don't take favors politically. We just want people to be good stewards of their constitutional responsibility.
You want legislators to go back to the days, if it ever existed at all, of where the voters and the majority of their constituency, that's ultimately what is influencing them versus super PACs and lobbyists and special interest groups.
Absolutely. This is the modern day Cincinnatus. This is the Washingtonian vision of a local farmer who is selected by his community to go represent them in Congress, does a couple of terms, and then comes back home. That was the original vision. What we've created instead is a permanent political class that is incentivized towards bad behavior. And we don't have a bad political system because we're bad people. We have a bad political system because we have a bad process. And what can we do to use technology to provide an end around that process, to do what technology often has done well? Disruptive technology does certain things very well. It cuts out the middleman. It connects buyers and sellers directly, like, Uber or Airbnb or other types of things. And that's what we're looking for here in democracy. Let's go back to the basics, which is the voters and their representative and all the middlemen that stand between us, between the voters and their representative. That's what we want to go around using this technology.
Social media platforms arguably thought that their companies would help bolster connectivity. You'd be able to streamline a message, an email, a letter to your cousin who lives, states away, halfway across the globe. But ultimately, what we have now, studies point to this, it's no doubt contributed to polarization. So say that there is a sudden influx of interest on Capitol Hill for your platform, and good for you if that does happen. Same with people and voters across the country. 10 years from now, if this is a primary way that elected leaders ultimately vote, the information that's on your platform influencing how they vote, how do you make sure that the AI that's incorporated and the machine learning into your platform is truly representative, and people can still have some of that trust in the platform if it's ultimately coming down to an AI platform aggregating all the content that comes from the voters to the leaders themselves?
I think that's a great point, and I think you hit on something very salient here. I have been working in technology now for a dozen years. And I am increasingly convinced that the Silicon Valley model is broken. And I think we're seeing that now, that the same sort of bad system of incentives that's creating bad behavior. And you're right, social media could be constructed entirely differently, but it is incentivized around enragement for engagement. And it makes a lot of money by keeping us pissed off and divided.
It's a business model.
It is. It's the business model. It's the corporate structure. It's the governance. So I think that comes down to the way we design ourselves as an organization, as a nonprofit organization, with a board of directors of people who have a range of political opinions, Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, Forwardists, Independents. A lot of it has to be very deliberate in the design and corporate governance so that we are doing the right thing and so that this is a true community group and not a, profiteering off of everybody's pain and misery around democracy right now. So I think that's really important. We've essentially taken the profit motive out. We are entirely a volunteer organization, and we are.
You want to stay that way?
Do I want to stay that way? I have no problem with that. I think it would be
let's say
great
that
to have
this don't
dual staff, but
right.
that's,
I understand, but ultimately, if you're a nonprofit, or at least a for-profit business, you have governing boards, et cetera, and everybody has their own incentives for certain groups. Let's say, what are some of the like motivations or oversight mechanisms right now? Say you get state funding ultimately approved so that you are not running afoul to your original intent, and that is making sure that you are representative of all constituents and not just those who give you funding.
Right, exactly. And that's actually why we went after state funding in the beginning. We felt like ultimately what we're doing should be done by the government, not by a nonprofit. Like the tools exist. The government could do this right now. Yeah. And we wanted it to kind of show our political leaders that, hey, you really have an opportunity here to regain the trust of voters. And we can demonstrate how that's possible. And I still think that could be the way that this project goes, that ultimately gets taken over by the government. The problem is that currently nobody has a lot of faith in the political leadership, regardless of where they live, it seems like. So if the government were running it directly, I'm not sure that I would actually help with the trust in this process. But to try to come back to your question about, staying small or staying a nonprofit. Yeah, our goal is to not be influenced, to try to put our thumb on the scales because some shareholder wants some vote to go a certain way and therefore tries to come and manipulate the results. The other thing is we were intentional about partnering with Votes, which is election technology that's been certified by several states in red and blue states. And we don't own the blockchain itself. So we can't see how people vote. It's a secret ballot to us. So we provide them the tools. We get the aggregate results and can put those up onto the maps and build the scorecards, but we can't see that Ben voted yes for the one big beautiful bill and Ramon voted no or whatever. We don't have that insight because the blockchain is the same blockchain that's being used for real public elections in multiple states and Canada right now. So that's part of the reason for our separation of concerns, if you will, between us and Votes. It's clearly a great partnership. We love working with them. The technology that they've built and others in the mobile voting community have built is truly amazing. And I think it'll revolutionize our process in a lot of ways. It's just ultimately, you're right, how we design our governance structure, how we put in guardrails, how we make sure that as this thing grows, it stays true to the mission and that we can be held accountable ourselves to our public purpose. I think that's all very critical.
How did Ramon Perez, the military veteran, and thank you for your service, no doubt, ultimately get so impassioned in this issue?
Well, look, I spent 13 years in the military. I had a friend of mine, a college classmate named Tyler Brown, who was shot by a sniper in Ramadi, Iraq in 2004. And it was a shock. I remember where I was when I heard. I still visit his grave. Now when I'm in DC, I can ride my bicycle over to his grave at Arlington. And I think after January 6th, not just January 6th, I was in Portland shortly after the riots there, and just seeing the results of what happens when people lose faith in democracy. And that, it scared me. It scared me to see that we had been spending 20 years trying to build democracies in the Middle East and Iraq, where Tyler lost his life, and Afghanistan. I did 4 different combat zone deployments, Iraq, Afghanistan, other places. And to see what felt like democracy falling apart back at home while we were all overseas, that really woke me up to the nature of this problem. And I wanted to know that Tyler's death was not in vain, that it mattered what he was fighting for, what others have been fighting for, that we were not about to let it slip through our fingers because we kept our eye off the ball.
How do you think he would be reflecting on the work that you're doing right now if he was here?
I really hope he would be proud. I really hope that he would think that, um, that his sacrifice resulted in something positive, and I would, yeah.
Ramon, I can't thank you and your buddies enough for what you laid down for us back here at home. So I hope you get all the thanks throughout the remainder of your life for your service, no doubt. And I'm fascinated with what you're trying to build right now. I know that there are some other folks that are trying to do it additionally, like we mentioned in California. So let me just close on this back at this point. How do you stay competitive with them? And do you maybe even share ideas with some other groups too of how to make this a better system?
Yes, great question. I don't stay competitive with them. We're all trying to solve the same problem, and I hope we can. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is build a better system of government so that my children and grandchildren can inherit it. And they've got great ideas. I love what they're building at Cal Matters. I love what they're building at Maple in Massachusetts. I love what Partners in Democracy is doing. I think there's such great, brilliant ideas out there. And all of us need to work together as democracy reformers to collaborate, decide best practices, and build something that can scale. And I think that means us working together so that we're not, picking apart the same group of people, that we design a system where no matter what website or mobile app you come to, there's a shared framework that we can all use. I think to me, that's the vision that I would love us to move towards, is that we're truly crowdsourcing public desires and interests into creating legislation in something like maybe a digital civic assembly or citizens assembly construct. I mean, there's great ideas out there. Some of them are being done at a state level, some at a local level. Nobody's yet pulled it all together, and I think it's really early days. And I love to see what my colleagues in different organizations are working on. And one of the nice things about being a nonprofit is that I don't have to worry about competing with them, because we're all here trying to do this to make our societies function, so that this 250-year experiment in America, in our American Republic, doesn't come to an end because people have decided that democracy can no longer deliver for them.
Before I let you have the floor and let people know how to get more information from your group, I have to ask this formality. You're a nonprofit. How do you get the funding to do what you do?
Well, we're very fortunate to have donations coming in from members of our board, our leadership team, as well as the society at large. Check us out, digitaldemocracyproject.org. We would love your support, but we need volunteers. If you're a developer, if you're a coder, or if you're a legislative wonk and are tracking bills in your state house, or if you are an organizer and are connected in your community and can drive voters to participate, or if you can write big checks, believe me, we need to pay for the servers and the software licenses to make this all function. And obviously increasingly AI tokens, which are becoming quite a big budget item. So all of that, this is a community group. We need a whole community effort to make this work. But the number one thing we ask of people is just to educate yourselves on the bills and vote in the app. And tell a friend, to do the same, so that we reach the kind of critical mass and have a real impact as a society.
All right. If you're a policy wonk, a tech whiz, or in the top 1%, obviously Ramon wants to hear from you.
A lot of our donors are actually donating $5 or $10 a month too. So It's not,
I say that
everything.
tongue in cheek, but yeah.
Yeah.
Follow the money. All right. Well, Ramon Perez, I appreciate your time. Thank you. And check out the Digital Democracy Project. I'll be following along too. Where do you ultimately publish any, I don't know if you have any like news publications or updates of what you guys are working on the back end. Is that something that you put out there?
We do push out newsletters by email or on social media. We try to do all the social medias now. There's like a new one every week. So
I know. You got to go where the people are.
Absolutely. We send SMS out for people who are voters. Every time we load new bills, we'll let them know by text message that new bills are in there that they can look at. We're trying to do all the things. And increasingly, I really appreciate podcasters like you, because I do think as we're going to have like 3 billionaires owning the entire media system at some point here. So, I think that the real interesting ideas are going to come through forum like yours, where new ideas can actually get heard. So thank you for hosting and having us on.
Well, thank you for sharing those ideas. Ramon, thanks, man.
Thank you.
What do you think? Do you think this type of technology, this platform might grow? It might gain some interest on Capitol Hill or back in where you live in your state, and maybe even hold your elected leaders more accountable. Make sure their feet are held to the fire as you elected them anyway. Let me know. You can find me, email me, no doubt, at bylinewithbendennis@gmail.com. You know where to find me on Instagram and all the socials, Broadcast Ben. But I hope if you would give this a good rating, this episode, and we're going to dive in further on how media intersects with politics, tech, our day-to-day lives, and the headlines, and why they really matter to all of us. So I appreciate you spending a little bit more time here on Byline. With that, enjoy the rest of your week. Take a load off. Don't make life too stressful for yourself if you can. Take it easy.